Okay.
That'll work.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Setting up the resolution is always fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Not that kind of right. And I'm that's fine for that.
And bring this over here. Bring that up here. All right.
Are we good, Doug?
Yeah, we are going.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out for our August Nova Meeting meetup. And who all is here for the first time at the Nova Meeting? That's good. About half and half. Okay, fair enough. We had 48 or 58 people sign up on the meetup.com. So I tell you, still trying to figure it out. Next time we're going to have like 30 people, and all 30 people show up.
It is August.
What's that?
I said it is August.
It is August.
It's people. You can bring your computer stuff.
Yes, yes, yes. Meetup.com is a fluid thing. But anyway, thanks for coming out. We're going on our third year of meeting up, and still seem to have good solid participation. So we're on our third session of our four-part series on the road to Ionic 2. Really focusing for a couple of us who have done Angular 1 or Ionic 1 and wanted to see what things are going to be like over at Angular 2. So what's TypeScript? What's ES6? What's, what are the things that we're going to need to be getting familiar with Angular 2? And then for folks who want to develop mobile apps, Ionic 2 is definitely the way to, seems to be the way to go in terms of really pulling things together and creating a professional app using all those technologies. So it was cool. I joined a Slack channel that I saw that Ionic has, which is really cool. So if you want to learn more about Ionic, definitely go out and just Google Ionic Slack, and you can find their channel. It's a community channel on there. And Mike, I think, is on every third request, third or fourth. You'll see his picture a lot there. And they had one channel there that just said upcoming events. And so I kind of put a post in there about our event. And who was I talking to?
Liz, probably.
Yeah, Liz. That's right. Liz, who was another person from Ionic, said, "Hey, how'd you like to have a guest speaker?" I said, "That'd be awesome." And so she volunteered Mike. She volunteers you a lot, huh? So,
She does.
So Mike is the developer advocate or community advocate.
Developer.
All of those things.
Everything.
Developer.
Whatever I need to be.
Helping bridge the gap between us people trying to use Ionic and the Ionic team there. So really glad to have Mike come down from Rhode Island. Appreciate having you. And that'll turn it over to you.
Cool. All right. So put that over there. Cool. So yeah.
Did you get the invite? I just realized.
I did not get the invite.
To share his.
Yeah. Otherwise,
Start for a couple more minutes. So by a show of hands, who all has done something with Ionic 1 or Angular 1? Angular 1?
Oh, Angular. Yeah, Angular.
Has anybody not done any JavaScript programming yet? No, everybody's done a little bit? Okay, cool. Cool. Excellent.
Okay, we're going to figure this part
Is anybody currently working or planning in the near future working on an Angular 2 application? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Should have got
All
one.
right, those mix. And hopefully everybody's interested.
Am I recent?
What's that? You like this?
Yeah. You want to double check that? Let me
We can write
also check.
Yeah, more like I like Angular 1 and ES6 a lot.
Oh, you like Angular 1 and ES6?
Angular 2. I love Angular 2 except for TypeScript.
You know, like TypeScript. All right.
I can guarantee you that I will switch your opinion on
There you go.
Guarantee.
Guarantee.
Are you ready, Mike?
Yeah, I didn't get. Just send it again.
It's like what? Taking JavaScript like Java. What's wrong?
Java.
That's kind of like ES6 though.
You sent it to Mike at
What
ionic.io.
ID do you use?
Okay.
Sublime. Yes, that's yeah. Probably have to pull up Visual Studio or WebStorm, and then I'll suck you in.
You can get it with VS Code, which I hate most editors. It's the one I tend to hate the least. I'm a Vim guy, And I have TypeScript working in Vim.
You got TypeScript working in Vim?
I wrote my own plugin.
Oh my goodness, there you go.
I was very bored. Okay, yeah.
Anything done with it?
Still didn't get it. Why don't you try my email address?
It came, should have come from me. All right, so sorry, which address?
Mike Hartington, HARTINGTON @gmail.com.
MIKEHAR, Mike Hartington, right?
Yep.
All right, we're trying that. Definitely works better to have you share that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I started, I think, just regular JavaScript. I haven't had time to look at it.
The nice thing about it, yes, is you can just take a JavaScript file and then just still running.
I like it a lot so far. Just
Nothing so far. This will be the
Well, now this is puzzling.
been a lot less code.
damn you Google Hangouts.
Yeah.
Tell you what,
If
I can
not,
send it
just drop the
directly
video
from
camera.
email. Say what?
If that, and just off the video camera, and you can just keep control and point the camera at the screen, that would be good.
Yeah. Yep.
He also,
All right, I sent it directly via Gmail this time.
that he prefers ESH over bash.
Wow.
So mine's
I don't even use that.
What?
I don't even use that.
You don't use it?
No. I
That
wrote
was the
my
reason why everybody used ESH.
no, I didn't want to use my ZSH. I wrote my own stuff.
Oh.
Got the I got the email now.
Yeah, okay.
Cool.
You're still using Mac OS though, right?
Hmm?
You're right, yeah.
He wrote his own.
It's called Mike OS. Okay.
It's progressive also.
It's agile. It's super agile.
All right, I'll switch to you.
Should I mute
Got
myself?
your face
for
on
that?
it. Yeah, mute yourself and select who, how, what kind
Turn
of
your
present.
volume down.
Here'll be the fun part. How do I do?
Upper left, should be upper left.
Yeah, it's just having to deal with multiple displays.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
It's got screen one, screen two.
Go there first. Come back here. Present. Screen share. There we go. All right.
All right,
Cool.
something's switching now. There we go, Angular 2.
Perfect. Yay. All right, now start my timer. Okay. So after all of that fun stuff, so yeah, we're gonna go into the kind of super high level aspects of Angular 2. I do want to preface it. It's going to be high level just because we don't want to get too familiar with everything. It is still changing every now and then, so we do gotta keep that in mind. What you may see things look like, it could change. It probably won't, but all the final APIs are kind of finalized now. They just may have a new argument or something small will change probably. So the things we'll kind of go over. We're going to look at some of the ES6 aspects of working with Angular 2, how that kind of relates if you're coming from Angular 1. We'll look at kind of the setup of Angular 2 and what does an Angular 2 app actually look like, and kind of dive into the TypeScript parts of it and why you would want to use TypeScript, or why you would want to just use the auto-completion of TypeScript and ditch static typing altogether, and try to figure out what's a good balance point for you. So the really simple concepts that we have here driving Angular 2 is classes and this new thing called Decorators. So Who's written any kind of ES6 code before? Who's written like any other language that has classes? So they look like that. They don't necessarily behave exactly like every other language's class syntax, but JavaScript kind of has classes now, and they work for the most part. Who's ever heard of decorators or annotations? Okay. They're really actually awesome. You'd think that something as small as like a decorator or this concept, and if you're not familiar with it, we're going to dive into them. But these little bits of functionality in the language really add a lot of flexibility and composability to your code. So we'll start off with the class bits of it. So Angular 1, this is very familiar code if you've done any Angular 1 development. We just had a simple class. We are looking to set up an initial array of items, 1, 2, 3, and then every time we call scope.add, it's going to call off a function, and we'll just add new a number to that array. So for this, 1, 2, 3, grab the length, new one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we'll keep going till forever. Now, this is all Angular. Everything from scope, everything to Angular.controller, to Angular.module, and even handling the dependency injection of that specific module. So the pain point here is that we are very coupled to a framework. And if we were to try to like port this into vanilla JavaScript, we're going to have some pain. We got a little bit there with Angular's controller as syntax. Now we can actually move out the main functional part of it. So that way we have this function called main controller. And that's going to replace that anonymous function that we had inside of our controller. It may sound a bit confusing, but it's pretty straightforward. So we'll just have main controller. We'll set up our initial bindings. We'll say var main equals this. So that way we can have a reference back to the actual original function. We'll say main.item is going to be that same array. And then we can take advantage of JavaScript's prototype chain and actually create a new prototype method on that first function to say, okay, this is going to be a new function called add, and it's going to reference back that original array and just do the same thing that we had before. This is a very particular way of writing controller as syntax code. This is kind of my preferred way if I were to write Angular 1 because it feels more like ES6 to me. And it actually translates to ES6 pretty well. And that's that same exact code written in ES6 using class syntax. It has its own proper scoping, has its own method syntax. So we can see that going from here to this, we get a lot simpler code, less coupling to actual Angular code. And this is just vanilla JavaScript. I mean, if you know JavaScript, you can look at this code and say, all right, I already know what's going on. We have a main class called main controller, and this is going to act as our main export out. We have an initial constructor where we're just going to set up the initial value of that items array. And then we have a method on this class called add. Now this is just going to do the same thing that we've been doing and just take the initial value, add a new one to it. So we went from the kind of typical Angular 1, how to learn Angular 1. Well, first we have $scope. That's the fun thing that everyone says, oh, just put everything on $scope. It's going to be magical. Well, we can actually use this, and JavaScript's pretty good with this and actual binding to the real controller or to the real function. And now it's just even simpler with ES6 because all that looks like a nice object-oriented pattern.
Is constructor specifically there? Like, is that, I'm forgetting the term, but like a protected word or whatever it's called?
Yes. Yeah, it's a reserved word.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll just get initialized and fired as soon as a class gets instantiated, right? Every single time. So, okay, well that's only half the problem. So we have logic kind of taken care of. I do want to add before I go any further that this same kind of setup not only works for a controller, but works for your services, factories, even your run functions and configs. You can all export that out as classes and set it up in the same way. So we'll talk about if we have a controller, that's probably going to get tied to some kind of UI component. So that way we can set the values and then actually display that. Well, we have this. So that's essentially our controller from Angular 1, now in a nice ES6 syntax and completely decoupled from Angular itself. And in Angular 1, if you were using something like UI router, we'd probably create a new state, give it a template, and then actually assign it a controller. This should be pretty familiar. Am I assuming that correctly? Okay. Yeah, if it's not, let me know. Well, this is fine, and it works great for Angular 1. But we can make that connection between the logic and the visuals of the code much tighter. So this is the component decorator. So the component decorator is basically all of our visuals, all of our actual representation of the class. Now, they act as functions that get applied onto a class before the class ever gets instantiated. So if we wanted to make like a read-only class, you can only read the values out of it, you can never write to it. We have a decorator called read-only that will set up that functionality for us, and all we have to do is write at read-only, close the braces. Component will do the same thing. Instead of read-only though, it'll give us the option to set the actual template syntax, like what would we have to write in our HTML to render this out. So here we just write out hello app. And then, okay, well now that we have the tag all in there, what gets rendered into it? So instead we can just give it a template property, and we're going to use template literal strings. So this is all part of ES6 as well. So we don't have to do the, okay, I have a string plus another string plus another string on a new line. We can actually just do multi-line templating now. And then from there, we can just set up the bindings as we've always had. So we have our a paragraph tag. We just have the double curlies for items, passing it through a pipe to get JSON out. And then we have a button underneath. Now, that click, that looks really weird. And that's probably not the first thing you're like, what is that? Where's my ng click? Because that was my first reaction when I saw all of this. We have the open and close parens. So these open and close parens, they become event bindings. So here inside of the button, if we want to bind to the click event, okay, well, we just take a pair of open parens and we put the event name that we want. Say we created our own custom event. Say we have an event called foo. Every time foo gets fired from somewhere, we want to call a method. So I could replace click and just throw foo in there, and it'll work automatically. I could work on focus, mouse over, mouse down. This gets rid of all of those ng mouse over, ng mouse down, ng touch, all of these super specific Angular event bindings, and just replaces it with a nice abstraction. So that way it'll just take whatever you give it and process it. And then the actual calling of the method doesn't really change from Angular 1. Once we set up that initial event binding, we give it the method that we want to call. It's on our class, and that all works as the same as Angular 1 would. So we have our component giving us our template, giving it the selector that we want to view, And then we have our class that's going to act as our UI logic. So this is going to be all of our setting up of initial bindings. You can think of it, this is be where we would call all of our services to load data. Everything that we need to make this bit of code work is all self-contained. And that's kind of the new point of Angular 2 is instead of having all these nicely kind of isolated bits, all the code that needs to make this work is right close to each other, in the same file even, kind of React-like for good or bad, but it does make the code much simpler to reason about because I just have to go here and know how everything's set up for it. So yeah, again, decorators, they provide that initial metadata for the class. They let the class know, okay, I am a class, but I am also a class type of a component. There's another decorator in Angular. This is more applicable to, like, say, your services. Anytime you want to make a request to a server, how does that actually get processed? Well, we have this thing called injectable. Now, what injectable will do is actually tell Angular's dependency injection system, okay, we need to make sure that this is here at this time injected and everything's all instantiated, and how does this relate to this other bit of code? Is it going to get newed again, or is it just going to reuse an already existing instance of the class? How's it all handled? Injectable handles all of that for us. So when we write our class, we annotate it with injectable. We don't have to worry about it. It's the magic of these little decorators. There's more than just the Angular decorators. There's actually a pretty nice community growing doing third-party decorators. If you've ever used Lodash before, these are actually pretty cool. I'm gonna actually load them because I'm quite a big fan. Yeah. So essentially, all of Lodash just becomes nice little decorators. So after 3, I forget the actual interpreted value, but this will be called, the bounce method. You can just put it right on top of method call, and it doesn't do anything that the original code didn't do beforehand. Just makes it simpler to just implement. Your code looks a little bit cleaner, and it's kind of just cool. I will say that. So those links will be in the slides when I post them to the Meetup group.
And that's so that you wouldn't have to set Lodash globally.
Right. Well, yeah, that would be.
So you don't have to abuse it and put the Lodash.
Right.
Global scope.
So once you actually import the decorators. Well, actually, no, this one that you would actually have to. I think the other one you don't. The other one's more advanced than this one, but it just make it easier to write instead of having to do like kind of _dash throttle and then put the function. You can just throw it on top and it's already taken care of for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question from the beginning?
Yeah.
So what's the benefit of, you started out with the whole turning the controller into a class, TypeScript object, however you want to do it, that can be instantiated. But so what's the benefit? I mean, usually object-oriented programming, you have to use it for multiple instances of the object. But for controllers, you just have one single. So what's the benefit of it?
So here's kind of where I was saying that JavaScript classes don't technically behave like classes everywhere. So essentially, the class syntax doesn't behave exactly like that. It's more on top of JavaScript's prototype chain. So everything that we were doing in our Angular 1 controllers is programming, right? It's all typical JavaScript prototype. And the class syntax actually just builds on top of that but just gives us like a nicer syntax. So we're not actually, we can do new instances, and like say we can create a person class, give it a couple properties of age, name, location, and then we can say this is a new person and then instantiate it that way. But we don't really need to. The big gain from using the class syntax with Angular 2 is that we just have a cleaner setup for all of this logic. If that makes sense. If you want to go into it anymore, I'd be happy to.
Oh, no, okay, I just want to get an idea.
Why?
You have the why, yeah. The whole.
Well, why? If you think about it, we were doing it already in Angular 1, right? We had $scope. Okay, that was great. It was some way to keep some kind of binding and have a reference back to the, this bit of code that we had in our project. Okay, well now we have controller as. We can still use this, like this keyword. It kind of works the same way. Still have a few tricks, but it's essentially we have a reference back to this bit of code, this function, this class, this object or prototype, whatever we want to call it. Now we can just replace, okay, well now we don't have to reconfigure Angular controllers again, because there's code to make sure that that works. We can just take advantage of what's already built into the language to begin with and just work around that instead of having to make our own stuff. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. So those components looked a whole lot like Angular 1 directives. Kind of the nice thing about directives when everyone first learned Angular was that you give it a template, you can give it some initial logic, and maybe some scope properties, and do some work with it. We have a new definition for what directives are in Angular 2. So anything with a template is a component. It's something that's going to get rendered onto the screen. It has its own internal visuals on it. But directives, they're a lot more specialized. So we could have had a directive called user profile, and it would just display the relevant information on that user. Well, now in Angular 2, that would be a user profile component. But if we want to iterate over all of those user profile components, we'd use a directive like ng4. So that's our new ng repeat, or we'd assign a new class like ng class, or all of these bits of code that actually don't have their own template and don't have their own visual, but they still can manipulate DOM or manipulate other components. So again, yeah, perfect example is the ng4 or ng repeat. This is going to be a bit of code that will create multiple instances forever long that we have, but it's not going to modify the template or change how it displays. So again, we have ng4. That syntax is slightly out of date, and I'm going to kick myself for not updating it. But we have star ng4, where we're just creating a kind of loop. And we're supposed to have let item of items. Now we can think of that as like the for of loop that we have in JavaScript now. So there's like the little mnemonic to kind of remember what this actually does. Because ng repeat item in item, it's kind of second nature, and I still got tripped up over it the first couple months. But once I figured out, okay, for of, it's just a for of loop, and it's just going to iterate over it all. It'll just, every time we add a new item, we'll just print out a new item into there, and it'll just keep looping over it. The good thing about this, it behaves exactly like you would expect Angular 1. So as soon as that binding updates, it'll update.
You don't have to have quotes around item of items.
No. Yes, you do. I think actually the presentation escaped them.
Oh, that makes sense.
So that's what I was talking about. I was like, I should have updated this. So yeah, if that would actually be correct, we'd probably have something, not TypeScript. We'd probably have something like We'll make a p tag, and inside of that we'd have star ng4, and then we'd say let item of items, and that would be our main loop, and then we'd have that let item would allow us to actually bind to the real object or the real instance of it. So if we want to pass that along to a click event handler or any kind of event handler, we could do click and say log item, and then have that just log the actual instance of that item. And that would just scope for every single one that we would create. Going back. All right. So again, most of this code, the component annotation, okay, that's Angular. The ng4 directive, that's Angular. The event binding, that's Angular as well, and the double curly braces, that's Angular as well. But everything else, that's still just plain old ES6. How does this fit into, like, say, once you get messing around with TypeScript? And I like to think of it as TypeScript just kind of being the second pair of eyes during your development. You know, if you've ever touched, like, say, Java, it likes to have a nice strict way of, here's how this is defined. C# does the same way. TypeScript kind of follows along that and gives you, like, nice little, okay, don't worry, I get your back for this. So it kind of solves a bunch of problems. Say you find a new fancy library, or say you have a new library and you're just not sure what the actual arguments are for this particular function. Like, how many arguments does Angular 2's new HTTP module have? Without actually diving into the source, you would have no idea. Or what other properties does component have? Because component has about 8 properties on it, and we've only gone over, like, the first 2. And this is the kind of common one that I hear a lot is, I've never used this before, please help, please send help now. I don't know what to do. So TypeScript at its core is essentially this static analysis of your code. It'll go through, create this nice little abstract representation of what your code is, what it ties to, what are its actual arguments, what's its return value, based on how you write your code. So if you write your code using TypeScript, it'll take advantage of all that. And then at development time, it'll do all these checks to make sure it's like, okay, I'm using TypeScript, I misspelled the property. I normally wouldn't find out until compile time or browser time. TypeScript will say, you spelled this wrong, or this isn't an actual property that we have available to us. It'll let you know before you actually get into it. Let's kind of look at that. So we have a simple project over here. It's actually the Angular CLI's kind of hello world. It's a bit much right now. I'm not a huge fan of it at the moment, but it does get the job done. So we have our initial bindings for this component. And if we open up the associated TypeScript file, we have a few different things. So let's give it a selectors. In a second. And if I may have to jump to code, because Vim is still in development. This is actually good because VS Code probably has the best TypeScript toolchain at the moment. This is a good look. Yeah, see, there we go. Argument type of selectors string is not assignable to the parameter of component metadata type. So, okay, we know that selectors does not exist. So we can come in here, and I haven't even built, I haven't even deployed to the browser, and I already have more information about how this actually works. So, okay, well, let's get rid of that. Okay, that works. Well, what other properties can I work with? I can work with, any animation, change detection system. Like, how does this actually update? I can work with all of these other, all these other properties. But unless I actually looked at the documentation online or actually read the source, I would have no idea. TypeScript kind of is that nice little documentation in the editor. I like it quite a bit. And to kind of go back to the HTTP example, if we look down here, we have an empty load method, and we'll just write this out real quick. We'll say return this HTTP, and you notice that as I start typing, it'll autocomplete all the actual methods. So, okay, I know I'm on this.http. This is the HTTP module. This module, as it's going through its analysis of all the code in real time, it'll realize, okay, here are all the available methods for this. Okay, so, okay, I want to make our GET request and just load some data. But what if I need to make sure that it has some kind of, auth token sent in the header? Well, okay, I know I have a GET. I have some options that I can pass. I can give it a URL. See if I can't zoom this a little bit better. So we have a URL. We know it's going to be a string, and then we have this options, which is going to be an object. The options are options are optional, so we don't really need to pass them. So it gets marked with a question mark. So we'll actually kind of build that out. We'll say .get and HTTP, blah, blah, blah. We don't care about the URL for now. We can pass it along these options. Okay, now it knows that this is the next part of the code that I'm on. So let's go in here, hit our completion. Okay, we can set the body. We can set the headers for this request. We can set the method for it. All these things that, again, I would actually have to look at either in the source or read the documentation, which, depending on your library that you're using or whatever, your mileage may vary, and you may get a framework that has not so good docs, or you may get a library that just has readme, figure it out. It does happen. So I like to think TypeScript is there to help me when no one else would. And honestly, it just becomes much easier to write. And if we would actually use this outside of, say, regular Angular and just doing document dot. Okay, well, now I can get all the completion for all my raw DOM methods. So all this good stuff. TypeScript really is awesome. Please check it out. And we'll go back to the Prezzo real quick. So there's a lot more to it than just that first kind of initial part that it showed. There's a lot of support for all these libraries. It is a Microsoft project, so some people may cringe when they hear that, but they've done very good making sure that it is open source. It actually, the guy who's behind TypeScript is the guy behind C#. So it's not like a ragtag team. It's a legitimate person. And they have this great tooling architecture around it. All of that completion is all available to you. So if you're ambitious enough to want to dive into all the internals of TypeScript's language services and build a plugin like I attempted to do. There's documentation for it. The TypeScript code for it is actually self-documenting because TypeScript source is written itself in TypeScript. So if you want to get meta, is that meta? Or would that be whatever?
Recursive.
Recursive, yeah.
There you go.
TypeScript is TypeScript is TypeScript. So the tooling behind it is amazing, and there's support for this in almost every editor. Like I said, I'm a Vim guy, and I got TypeScript working. It's in there if you're an Emacs person, I guess. But like all the major editors that people actually use these days, like WebStorm, obviously all the Visual Studio 2015 has it. VS Code has it right out of the box. Sublime has it. It's available as a plugin through Microsoft. So they developed their own plugin for Sublime, and there's another plugin for Atom. If you guys are familiar with Atom, that has the same level of integration that everything else has because it's all using the language services underneath. And the community is just very nice. They're all very welcoming, and they're all very. They all just want to see every TypeScript do well, and you can go into their forums or their Gitter channels or their GitHub and get responses from like the core members within a day. So other than that part, there is the static typing part of it, which I have some opinions on it. So here would be like a vanilla JavaScript or vanilla TypeScript example without Angular. We have a variable called foo, which it's typed to a string. So we use those colons to say that this is a type. We have a number set to for Baz, and it's set to 1, 2, 3. Again, when we call it completion, we know that all of this is a number. We know that Baz is a number, and we can just say, okay, here are all the methods for a number variable. For certain stuff like this in your own code, you probably don't need it. Static typing can get a little bit verbose. You can start seeing code where okay, well, we have a load method over here. It's going to return, we'll just say void, because it's not going to return anything. Or if we wanted to say that this public HTTP, or say, okay, now we have this object called person. It's going to be typed as a actual, we'll say name, string, age, number. You really don't need to do that. Chances are, if you're working on it in your own project, you know the code pretty well. If you're a team of, say, 15 people, maybe it'd be a good chance to like invest in it. But if you're a smaller team, or if it's just like just you working on the project, there's really no need for it. At least in my opinion. So those types and all of the information that TypeScript gets, it is inside your code at build time, or at compile time, or pre-compile time. But so you may think, okay, well, what happens when it gets compiled and shipped to the browser? It all goes away, and that's kind of the best part about it. It's only there when you're developing, and then once you deploy, it's all gone. So just a quick kind of demo on like the build process, because the build process is very different from, say, an Angular 1 build process, where to include a library, you would just have the script tag, or to include a new controller, you just add a script tag, or write everything all in the same file. You rarely saw large examples of complicated Angular 1 build structures. They do exist, but it wasn't a common thing. So we have actually, I'll go back real quick. We actually have this link to the Angular CLI. So if you go to here, this is going to be the recommended, go back real quick. There we are. This is the recommended way to start building your apps with Angular 2. It gives you everything that you need right out of the box. It gives you a nice build process, gives you the file structure, gives you your tests all scaffolded out. So if you want to run your unit tests, you got it all kind of set up for you. It gives you the ability to generate those new components on the fly. So say you're, okay, well, now I need a new user profile component. I can just say ngg component user profile, and it'll generate all the scaffolding out for that, including that unit test. And it goes beyond just that single component, but also gives you the ability to do components directive, pipes, services. If you want to do just raw classes, that way you can do more object-oriented stuff. You can, and even some TypeScript stuff like interfaces and enums. It does have support for routing. The routing story in Angular right now is a little tricky. There are some work being done right now, so hopefully in the next release it will be all stable. But if you want to actually get around this and install it and play around with it outside of here, you can just install it through npm install -g Angular CLI. And again, all these links will be in the slides afterwards. And with that, we get a structure that looks like this. We have a come set up out of the box like with as a Git repo, so you can deploy it, push it to Git, or if you want to deploy it to GitHub pages, you could, or just start having some version control, which I actually really like that they do that. It gives you some settings, so you have your editor config. And then it has its own kind of specific Angular CLI file. So we'll look at Angular CLI, where we can basically lay out how our project works. So we have some initial data for the Angular CLI about what our project's name is, the version, how does the build interpret it, where does it know to go and say, here's my starting point. And from there, go out and fetch everything that's getting imported. If I have any additional add-ons, third-party packages can kind of work with the Angular CLI and extend themselves through this way. How do I actually set up my testing story? So, if I want to run protractor, I run some end-to-end testing. Where's the actual config file for that? If I want to run Karma, never use a mouse. If I want to run Karma, where's the config file for that? And then some other useful stuff for like the generating of components and directives and stuff. Like, where's my base app structure? Where can I go and figure this all out? So it allows you some level of flexibility to give you a lot of control that you want. But out of the box, this is all what I was given, and it's pretty solid. So if we were to run ng serve, we can ignore that right now because I am on node 6. You'll notice it's going out, building all of this code, bundling it all for me. This is from that earlier error. So let's actually go fix that and get rid of all of this. Save that. Don't want that. And we'll save this. Okay, so it automatically will rebuild, watch everything for you. Go up. I'm going to blank on what the actual URL is for the live reload server. Yeah, they changed it. 4200, which seems like an obscure port to use. But hey, my app is running. I can make modifications to it. So we'll say, let's move this over here, make it easier. App works. And we'll just say, does it really work? Save.
Red line under app component.
So that's actually part of the editor. Just there's a linting setting that you can enable. The defaults just are meh. So we can see that it's all working out for me. It's all updating. It's all building for me. And I really don't have to worry about all the internals. If you want to dive into it, again, all of that is available to you. And you can see we have, when we look at it this way, we do have quite a bit of files in here. But the good part is that I didn't have to create all of this myself. And I had a build step already given to me and set up out of the box. So I think the Angular CLI moving forward, it will be very successful. And I really think that this will be the way that you move. Yes.
So this obviously has node support. What about like for external libraries, say, like we use Bower. Is there another like external library thing you would use, I guess, to convert into TypeScript automatically?
So
Sorry, go ahead. I say there's like a definite, it's called like definitely typed repo that is basically like where you can go instead of Bower that has the typed files. So like there's like a typed Lodash version there. And then I'm pretty sure, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Angular 2 and a lot of the front-end frameworks are moving away from Bower, and you're installing from NPM now instead of Bower.
So Bower is one of the casualties in kind of modern JavaScript. All for good reasons. Bower, while it is great, NPM is better. And seems to be the cool kid right now, unfortunately.
So the back end and front end imports are all going to be done through NPM.
Right. Which it gives us everyone a centralized kind of ideal location to grab all their models and publish them.
So the Angular CLI, the version you used was Webpack. Is that kind of default or?
No, right now it's that was actually a opt-in part of it. Right now it's using the currently release is using called Broccoli, which is like Gulp, but kind of like it's a slower version of dependency bundling. The new Webpack version is much faster. I can see where you're kind of going. A lot of people have strong opinions on Webpack, and if it's...
I'm just kind of curious where you see the industry going more, where you think we'll be in 3 months.
I'm bad at telling the future. I have no idea. I thought Gulp was going to be around forever.
Yeah.
Still works.
So you think Gulp's only fading out?
No, Gulp still has its needs. You know, no one wants to look through an entire package JSON for what are the random NPM scripts for all of this. Gulp has its place as a just general task manager or task runner. And Webpack can handle all of the JavaScript bundling for my app. It's super specialized for the for web apps because you can start doing things like code splitting, figuring out, okay, if I'm at this part, I only need to load these 3 modules. Later on down the road, I can make the request to get this stuff and figure out how that all works and not load a giant 2 meg file. So
I thought I heard that Ionic, though, for Ionic 2 was moving away from Webpack and just using Gulp for the default CLI. Is that right?
we did do that. We moved from Webpack initially to Gulp and Browserify, and now we're moving back to Gulp and Webpack.
You are moving back.
Yeah, we will be moving back to Webpack. We just got on the get.
So I know we'll talk about Ionic 2.
Yeah, we'll talk
in
about
the
that.
future. But do you see there's the Angular CLI is definitely influencing and feeding into what Ionic 2 is and will be?
It goes both ways. I mean,
Okay.
we are working with them pretty regularly. Like we have our weekly meetings with them, and we'll tell them what we're doing. They tell us what they're doing, and we kind of feed off each other. Webpack kind of seems to be the community standard so far, at least with ES6 and more kind of modern JavaScript developing, for good or worse. It does have a kind of slight barrier to entry because it is a little complicated. But once you have the kind of pre-built setup for you, you really don't need to think about it, and it's all taken care of. Yeah, just nice little things, kind of something that, and if we really want to bring it around a nice large JavaScript community, we're using Webpack, which is a tool popularized by React, and we're using an Angular CLI, which is based off the Ember CLI. So we're all kind of connected. Nice little
That's very
thing.
diplomatic.
Yes. For the third-party modules, if you want to get like additional types for them, there is that definitely type repository. There's also a new one called Typings.
Which is hosted by NPM.
Yeah, which is hosted on NPM. Microsoft is also doing their own typing things in conjunction with the Typings team. So that way they're not duplicating efforts. And eventually Typings will go away and definitely Type will go away and it'll all just be hosted on NPM. So for this one, if we want to look for Lodash, we could just do typing install, or let's look for it first. So we'll search for Lodash. No.
Next, better, it's fine.
Okay, so I have a few different packages for it. There are those Lodash decorators again. We'll just install Lodash.
Terminal is this.
iTerm. And we'll just save it.
A lot prettier than my items.
It's ZSA. You can get Bash to kind of look like
Yeah.
if you want.
When I'm on ZSA.
And then unrelated note, like I have way too much free time at night, so I customize everything. But yeah, so now if I want to use just like raw Lodash and not use those additional like decorators, I now have a directory called Typings that has all the modules and the definition for Lodash and all of its methods, which it has quite a bit. So we can see we have what's called these interfaces. This is more TypeScript development stuff, which you probably won't need to know, but gives you all those nice stuff. So
Now, Webpack, when it goes and builds the actual,
Mhm.
what's going to be in your deployed file, it's going to do something close to Patreon is going to concatenate all the JavaScript files?
yep, it'll go through and it'll do module resolution. So right now it's set up to do like node style module resolution. So if you import something and it's using kind of not using like any path, like if you're saying import from Lodash or import from Angular HTTP, if it can't find it locally, it'll resolve it in node modules and just automatically include that. What's great about Webpack and Webpack 2 is that if you include like a specific part, so in here, we're only loading core or a component from Angular core. Instead, we want to look at, view child or all of this kind of other crazy things that we could import. If we don't want to use any of that and it's not being used anywhere else, we can just discard all of that and just pull out the code that we need for component and its dependencies.
And Webpack will do that?
Webpack will do that. It's called tree shaking. So it's very powerful, very flexible too at the same time. Did you guys have any questions?
Does the Angular CLI help you? Is it basically what you use so that you know you're doing it in current
Kind of like,
version of Angular 2 and not doing anything different? Because you go out on the web and you say, how do I do a route config? And there's examples and there's plunkers that work, and then you go to these route config. Those are saying,
yeah. The Angular CLI will give you a project that has at least the most recent, what's it called? It'll give you the most recent version. So in here, we have package JSON, and we notice that we have RC5. That's the most recent one. The Angular CLI is actually owned and run by the Angular team, so it's not like a third party has to play catch up. They can coordinate their releases and their those generation of routes and like components and all of the syntax. They can coordinate all that.
Is it actually editing like your TypeScript files, like your main TypeScript or your module?
It can.
Like if you add a component, that's an interesting, like make a brand new component.
Yeah, so we'll make a new component, ngg component, and we'll say user profile.
Can you just explain the NGG part?
Okay, so yeah, it's just shorthand.
Okay.
So when you install the CLI, you get an initial binary called ng. So Angular. G is just a shorthand for generate. We can still do that, but G is just also easier to type. But when we generate this, it'll go through and actually create those files for us. It'll give us the actual, it'll give us the like test file for it. It'll give us like a way to actually export this out and import it into our app. It'll create a CSS file for it. It'll create the HTML file for it. We'll go over to our editor, look how that works. Here's our user profile. And it doesn't include it. It won't include it into the build until you actually use it. So for this case, if I were to build, user profile will just not get included. But if I want to actually render out user profile into here, once I import it into the main script and say, remember, boy, they're right. So now I kind of broke the editor because I added the new stuff. But once you include it into the actual component and then use it in there, once it's imported, it'll automatically include it. So it doesn't actually modify your own files. It will just give you the file, it'll just modify your folders and create all that work for you. So again, user profile, I have the kind of setup for it. I got the best practices to use ng on init and not put things into constructor. I have CSS kind of set up for it, HTML, and the accompanying test files. That way, if I wanted to go and look at testing later on, I have this all structured out, and I can keep that development of the component and its accompanying tests together. Yes?
Is Ionic G using NGG behind the scenes?
No. We have our own setup for that I can go over next. Yeah.
What tech server is this?
This is VS Code. Yeah.
It's open source?
Yep. Open source, cross-platform, Mac, Windows, Linux even.
It's my platform.
Yeah. And built on web technology. So that's a fun thing to always throw around.
An electron.
Yeah. It's using Electron underneath. Cool. So
So VS Code is the next Atom, was it built from Atom, right? Is it work?
yes. So the Atom team like extracted out the of what makes Atom, called it Atom Shell, and now it's just called Electron. So that's what this is built out.
When I used Angular CLI to do the Angular material,
Mm-hmm.
it took forever to actually build it. And I came back with this, you're using Angular CLI as a non-administrator or something like that. What's that all about? And what's Ember CLI doing?
So earlier I said that the Angular CLI started out as a fork of the Ember CLI. So that way because the Ember CLI is actually rather good. And Angular, instead of creating their own, said, there's this open source CLI, why don't we just kind of borrow it? And as it's matured, that kind of has the traces of Ember have kind of gone away. So you probably got a older version from a while ago, or is this like just now?
Well, I think I went to the Angular material site
Mhm.
for the latest download. So that's what they have stuck out there, I guess.
The Angular material documentation is still ongoing. It's a little bit slower than most people would like.
Is there some aspect of it running as an administrator versus TypeScript in terms of compiling?
No, there shouldn't be. The only thing that it would need is that the actual CLI itself would just need to be installed globally. But all it would, and that's just so it's available everywhere.
So if something simple, a build process taking 3 or 4 minutes, something wrong?
Yeah, that's broccoli. If you got like the standard Angular
So
CLI.
if you went to Angular material site, is it possible giving him an older version of the CLI and then?
No, if he's probably getting an older version of the CLI because the one that I'm using is still not released yet. It's in beta actually itself. There are instructions on the Angular CLI repo on how to get the beta version of it. You probably got the Angular CLI that's using broccoli, and it's a little bit slower to actually build out your actual app. So that's exactly what you face, and that's the problem Webpack really solves.
So yeah, one more question is, so one of the big problems I have with Angular 2 is I didn't want to create files and lots of small components. So I would make like a service or something like that in the same file that there's a component, and I'd get it to work, inject it in and everything, and then maybe I'd go make another component, but then, oh gosh, this component needs that service, I put it out of the file. And I think I should still be able to do that, but it's kind of like I want to keep trying to figure out how to do that.
A lot of that has to do with how. Well, no, it's not really. It's not how TypeScript works. It's a lot of it has to do with how like JavaScript and its modules will work. I'm kind of on your side. I don't like the idea of like a 3-line file that does something. But at least for the component isolation, it makes sense to split them up and organize them by just like, this is my component for, again, user profile. This is the user profile component. It has nothing to do with, it doesn't need to know about that service. It doesn't have to have like an extra class in there for whatever you need, for whatever you would want to write to it. But if you want to have like service, that one I would suggest, yeah, that should be its own file and not included into the actual component. It's kind of pros and cons of.
Some kind of fighting it about one.
Yeah, it's kind of going against some of the better practices that the JavaScript community thinks of now.
You're saying, well, there's, put stuff together that's going to be used together, but then it's like, split everything out.
Well, it all gets put together in a single file at build time. The good separation about the good thing about the separation right now is that it allows you to keep this bit of logic to itself. It doesn't need to know about. It doesn't need to be part of this component for whatever reasons. We have this nice separation, and that way a person can jump onto the same project and know, okay, here is this particular structure. Here's this. I know what this does and only this. Here are all my services and everything. I know what this does, and not have to think about it.
Projects that, I guess they're running into that issue. They did is they could actually set a module for, say, all services, a separate module for all components, a separate module for all. And and they just threw all the directives in one file, all the services in one file. And so this is Angular 1.
Yeah, it's possible. It is just fighting kind
It
of
was fighting.
the way to build things. There is a very in-depth guide put out Angular 2 style guides, and good thing. So there is a pretty good collection of style guides. Basically, how should these apps get structured out? How should we build all of this? Well, that's good that they actually linked to the official one. So if you're familiar with the Angular 1 style guides, yeah, you have?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this would be your best place to go for figuring out how should things get structured out. And yeah, they do recommend keeping those modules smaller and kind of isolated and separated by features.
Somewhere in there, says, what if it's just a little bit?
Yeah, it is. You know, there's asterisks next to everything.
And then the other big problem I had was we're trying to evaluate Angular 2 whether or not to build a pretty large app with it. And route config drove me nuts. Just trying to prove out, you know, how am I going to have sub routes or whatever, and then I think the latest thing was to actually create a separate route file and it just sort of exports a constant array, and then it gets, I don't know, providers or whatever. How do you do if it's like sort of like a sub module with its own route? Is that child route? What is that?
That,
have any like real like examples of
so the routing story is a bit of a pain point and kind of a headache. I had some experience with the Angular router maybe a version or two ago, and the unfortunate thing is that they depreciated one and then depreciated another. So the newest iteration of the router, which got released maybe like a week ago, I'm still kind of learning myself and trying to figure it out. So I feel your pain when you say that. It's what's that?
Is it better than the one before?
I haven't been able to decide yet. So far, everyone has been able to say it's much better than what it was before, and kind of built off another router, the NGRX router, kind of taking some of those design cues and how routes should be set up.
Is it an RC5 or is it not?
It's actually independent from it. Angular router, Angular 2 router.
That's the one thing I figured out
Yeah.
is that the plunker said it had Angular was newer than if it said Angular 2.
Yeah, they're all packaged independently from one another. So if you don't need the router, or say you want to just use UI router, you could do that and just import it and not have to grab the router code for it. So I don't really have a good answer, unfortunately. I can leave you with some great links for information that kind of go deeper into it, written by people who have written the router. So that's the best I can do actually right now, unfortunately.
What do you think about for timelines for RC5? Is CLI, is that still beta or is that?
I believe it's beta right now. That's still got some time, and it does show.
I just installed it.
Yeah, there are some things that do need to get cleaned up on it. It's still working out the initial functionality, but once you get it working, it does run rather smooth. Timeline for that, it's going to be a little bit. For actual Angular 2, hopefully soon.
I don't see how you could have how can you have Ionic 2 now based on Angular 2. It's a moving part.
Well, it's been a fun time, and we can go over at the next meetup because we will go all into Ionic 2.
And we also have another month, so let's try to make it better.
Oh, story always gets better with time. Are there any other questions?
I have a Angular question. Maybe I'm trying to break it even. Is it possible to actually in Angular 1 or Angular 2 have a directive as a variable, kind of like an input? Because I was trying to create something and I was like, I didn't know which directive I was going to need, and so I was going to try and call it as a variable. And every time I do that, it throws up these can't do that.
Call the directive as a variable.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't believe you can do that. Yeah, I don't think you can do that. What kind of directive are you writing?
I was trying to do WYSIWYG charting
Okay.
and didn't know like what charts we would choose. And so the chart was a directive, and so like, okay, look at the chart type. That chart type is your directive based on whatever it was. And so it's a call the directive.
Yeah, you can't do that. Cool. If you guys don't have any questions, I don't have any more information. I will post some slides and all the relevant links will be available, so that way you guys can have more time to kind of dive into it. I didn't want to go too deep because it is, like I said, it's a little bit of a moving target, and
What are
there's
some of
so
the
much
best-
to go into.
What are some of the best resources you think, just in terms of folks that are having the experience and are trying to get deeper in Angular too? The style guides.
Style guides, their actual documentation.
Yeah.
There's a couple of blogs actually that I do suggest. Let's see if I can find Victor's. Victor's Sapkin, I believe his name is. Yeah, Victor Sapkin. He is actually the author of the Angular router. So those router questions that you would have, this is the person to actually ask about because he wrote it. Wrote actually a whole sub book about it. I think he's selling for like $20, relatively cheap for the amount of information. But he writes a lot of, Angular 2, what are some of the concepts that you will be facing, like how should you do data state management inside of your app? What are some of the approaches that you can do? What are some of the ways that you can do it? Should you use functional programming or more of a, object-oriented approach to it? So all these cool things. He goes over all the template syntax, like why is it star ng4? Or why is it those square braces and curly brackets for event and property bindings? Another one, ThoughtRam.io. These guys are Angular trainers. Pascal, he is one of the kind of well-known people inside the Angular community. And they blog frequently about Angular 2 and everything, and a few other stuff like RX, which is a whole other topic that we could get into. But they can go through all their other stuff, like how do you do forms?
What's this one called?
ThoughtRam.io. I'll put a link in the meetup notes for this. But these are all good information that you should check out regularly.
Thanks.
Yeah. Awesome. So
Very good. We'll bring up our next questions next month.
yeah, I actually can't wait to go through all the Ionic stuff,
Very cool.
all the pain points that we
Give us
fix.
2-minute preview of next month.
Ionic 2?
Yeah.
You want
I just wrote
to?
Ionic 2 components.
Can I just download the terminal? Is that possible? You can lower it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can get the Angular CLI. I've been using the Ionic 2 CLI to do like this kind of stuff.
It worked.
Yeah.
So, but thank you.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. Thank you.
But Ionic 2,
The one I used was for Angular material.
yeah.
And that's the one that, it works, but it just is very, very.
It's fun part of updating now.
Process.
Yeah, thank you.
See if this actually works. If it works, it means I was supposed to show you guys a nice little preview of what Ionic 2 apps can look like when they're built with Angular 2.
If not,
I will say the kind of pain point with the builds is source maps, especially when you're pulling through all this code from different places. Generating the source maps and putting it in an appropriate location does take some time. So here's a sample Ionic 2 app built with Angular. These boys on track. Fix it that way. Sound is going to come out from my computer and nothing else. Don't want to actually put the, there we go. Yeah. Have that all working. Have the same thing working for like a material design theme. And if you have a Windows device, we have all of that kind of working in a nice Windows theme with the proper animations and UI components for each platform. And we will go over more next time on that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming down.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for coming out. You're welcome to linger for a few minutes if you want to chat. Appreciate it.